On March 10th, a movement to create a new kind of community will elevate what's being called the National Day of Rest for Black women. In this month, where we celebrate women's contributions, there's a broader discussion about the role of restoration on the journey. And joining me today is Jalina Porter, humanitarian and an entrepreneur who is passionate about the advocacy around Black women in their most restful state. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I know you've had just this incredible journey, and you weren't always in that restful space yourself, especially during the time that you spent at the State Department. And I think it's really important to let people know that you became the first Black woman or person of color to ever serve in a spokesperson role for this 250-year-old venerable entity. There couldn't have been a whole lot of rest in the role.
There absolutely was no rest in the role. My days were extremely long, extremely rigorous. As you know, dealing with world issues, you're dealing with conflict at every corner of the world all the time, at all hours of the night, in the mornings and the afternoons, and making sure we're in lockstep, obviously, with the White House and with our colleagues at the Department of Defense, and as well as the other agencies that were important to our national security. The margin for error was just relatively zero. And so dealing with all of that 24 hours, 7 days a week, you don't really get a break.
And you were wearing two hats for part of your time, speaking for the State Department and also speaking for the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas Greenfield. And I'm thinking about these two very demanding roles and wondering how you juggled them both.
I took a lot of ashwagandha. And, you know, it was one of those things where I would always say to myself, look, I'm not here for a long time, but I'm here for an impactful time. And I didn't know while I was in it, you know, how impactful it would be, but I really wanted to make my mark, knowing that I was this transformational figure, knowing that I was a first, and knowing and learning at that stage of my leadership journey that leadership can be very, very lonely. And I'm just grateful for my community that I had, you know, my parents who live a little bit farther away, and the people that I have out here, and especially outside of the workplace, who were encouraging me to keep going, of course, when the times got rough, and rough times were had several times during my tour. But it was definitely an impactful time, and I'm glad that people can see me and know what's attainable and strive for even greater heights.
You talk about how the culture within the State Department and who you were often at odds. How did you negotiate that each day?
Well, listen, I think everything in life is a negotiation, but for me, the most important thing was showing up as my true self. I think we have our true self, who are our true selves in the workplace, and we have our true selves outside of the workplace. But for me, it was, again, really important to showcase that it's okay to be a confident, competent, very accomplished Black woman in spaces that haven't traditionally welcomed us or haven't traditionally seen us. So for me, whether it was appearing on media and changing my hair, sometimes it was straight, sometimes I had braids, sometimes I had twists, maybe in my natural state. And these were things I think in all workplaces sometimes are a little bit taboo for Black women. But it was a full circle moment for me, because when I was a professional dancer on NBA and NFL teams, I was the only one wearing my hair in a natural state. When I worked for Congressman Cedric Richmond, I worked on the Crown Act, creating a respectful and open world for natural hair to ban discrimination on Afro-textured hair. So doing things like that was important for me, because I know I had people looking at me at all ages and stages, and it mattered. I remember getting notes from friends at the White House or notes from people in the State Department like, oh girl, I love your hair. I saw you on the news. You make me so proud. So those things did matter, and I'm glad that I did them.
You talked a little bit about your path. I see how you dropped in, how you were an NBA dancer for a point. Your path to diplomacy took a very different route than what is typically prescribed for most on that path.
And actually, that's me being off the beaten path is kind of what I think was a challenge for a lot of people. I think often you encounter people who tried to put you in a box, and I just was simply unboxable, right? I'm someone who, Started off my career as a Peace Corps volunteer teaching English in rural Cambodia. Didn't have electricity, didn't have running water. I slept on the grass mat on the floor, got dengue fever, was deathly ill my first month in country. And, that actually opened my eyes to the world of diplomacy and working at State Department, and it planted the seed back then. And so I continued on my path after that in communication, but always still carried on diplomacy and international affairs in other ways too. And it led me to where I was in my role. So, I mean, the path was very different, but it was still very intentional. And I think I even remember when I was at Howard and telling people I was going to do the Peace Corps. I mean, I had people didn't take me seriously, laughed in my face, and they're like, oh, when are you going to get a real job? And some of those same people were, in my ear championing me when I, had my role at the State Department, being a trailblazer there. And so I think what doesn't make sense to a lot of people made sense to me, and I had to have a lot of conviction, but times were hard because, again, when you have this lonely path and path that may seem a little odd to others, you have to have a lot of self-confidence.
Let's talk about that path, because I think Black women in a lot of cases are striving to reach certain levels, and it takes them a while to realize that reaching whatever their pinnacle is, as you described, can be a very lonely experience. You didn't have anyone there who you could talk to or run something by. It was just you. And I have to imagine that realization hit you pretty quickly.
It hit me very quickly, and I was fortunate enough to lean on my faith and lean on people very close to me who were outside of the workplace. But it's something that I tell young people, or even people who are my age or people who are older than me looking for a career change, is that it's very important to have those connections. And I was someone who came from off the beaten path of a different route in politics and diplomacy. So I didn't have the advantage of, working with fellowship programs or cohorts or having mentors and sponsors in the workplace. So I often always talk about the greatest service or gift that you can give someone as a workplace is to be their sponsor, to advocate for someone when they're not in the room, to give them advice. And I was someone who came to Washington with a dream, right? I was someone who would say, hey, can we go for coffee? Or can you look at my resume? Things that I knew were low-hanging fruit, and people not really being responsive to that. So on the flip side, I'm someone who always makes time for things that may seem little, and people who ask me that too. But I always impart, I'm like, listen, you don't want to have it as hard as I did. So make sure that if there are programs where you can have a cohort or friends or people who are going through what you're going through, always try to go that route, because it's a lot better.
Yeah, paying it forward
Yes.
certainly is the best thing to do. Can we talk a little bit about this grind culture that I know you have talked about, sort of unconsciously subscribing to in all of these roles, trying to find this level of success, which after you attained it nearly left you fully exhausted and burned out?
Yes.
What do we do about this grind culture? Because everywhere you look, you see people posting about it. I've worked this many hours, I'm getting my grind on. It's almost like we've glamorized the fact that we work, but we don't rest.
We've definitely glamorized the fact that we work, and I think it's detrimental to our health. And I want to say I'm not a medical doctor. My comments are not approved by the FDA, but I have firsthand experience with burnout. From being rushed to the hospital in obviously a time where I didn't have time to really take care of my health. And I know that even sounds pretty absurd to say out loud, but it was true. And that's how I felt. And as Black women, we're used to wearing so many hats and wearing it well and carrying weights that no one really sees, but we carry it so well that no one knows, or carry it so well that people ask us to do things, and we're all about our excellence. And so it's like, oh, not only am I going to do this, I'm going to do this so well, I'm going to do it over the top. And I was also someone who struggled with asking for help. And so when you are put into a corner, then you have nothing left but to ask for help and to seek that help and to be vulnerable in that. And that's what I encourage women to do as well.
So you've taken these experiences and you have really since last year been on a bit of a mission to emphasize both the importance and the necessity of rest for Black women. How do we learn to give ourselves permission to do that without feeling guilt?
Well, you just said a word that's actually a part of one of my affirmations. I give myself permission to rest. So saying that to myself also changes my psyche. And I think, we've also been conditioned to think that rest is a reward. Well, I'm of the mindset that Black women should think that rest is your personal responsibility and your birthright. You need it to thrive. I think everyone knows that, you know, in order to have a healthy body and a healthy mental capacity and a good relationship with yourself and others, is that you need to invest in your health and in your wellness.
Put the mask on you before you can help anybody else.
Absolutely. So obviously when we go on the planes, we learn that important lesson. And the lesson that I've learned over the years is that while it's been a very altruistic path to serve, and I'm so honored to have served my country and serve other people, but that service doesn't mean anything if you don't serve yourself first. And that's what I want to impart on Black women, to really invest in themselves, whether it's using your Peloton app, and I use it just for the meditation. You know, I don't even actually use it as much for the riding, whether it's making sure you take walks. I've asked for accountability partners in my new fitness journey because, again, there was once a time where I was in tip-top shape as a pro dancer, and when you get into life, having other responsibilities, some things take key and some things become a little bit more priority. But when you think of what you want to do and be here on this earth, and not only about having an obligation to leave your mark, but it's like you want to leave happy.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about this paradigm shift that we need to have, because you talked about this idea that you had to be excellent every day at all times with no mistakes. And clearly you had a very high stakes role. Your mistake could have caused a ripple effect, which could impact relationships between the United States and other countries. The rest of us don't have work that might have quite the stakes attached to it, but we do have this bar of excellence that we want to hold every day. How do you step down and say, I can still be successful without being at 100% every single day, all of the time?
I think that's exactly it. For me, the paradigm shift came when I realized that coming to work or coming to other facets of life at 100% or 110% every single day was what was breaking me down, right? And I realized that showing up for myself at even 5% one day, 15% the next day, 100% one day, back to maybe 2% another day, as long as I showed up in some capacity, then that I was honoring myself. And I think if we think about it that way and not put so much pressure on ourselves to perform, or pressure that society puts on us as women and as Black women and as workers, we'll realize that that's the better outcome to do.
So walk us through this, right? Because you have cast aside the rush for a slower, more intentional, more deliberate life, a fruitful life.
Yes.
How do we take those first steps to get where you are from where we are?
The first step that I took that I like to impart on people is to surrender. And what I mean by that is surrender the need to rush, surrender the need to have a sense of urgency. And certainly we have things and responsibilities in life that are urgent, but I think it's helpful to prioritize those things. And it's also helpful to give yourself permission to make sure you make time, whether it's daily, whether it's weekly, whether it's monthly, or whether it's quarterly, just for you. And it could be whatever you define. It doesn't have to be what a magazine defines. I know for me, I've said I want to do my quarterly facial, so I've gotten my one for this quarter, and that's my new thing, investing in my skincare. And I like that. I've never done that for myself before, and you just have to find what works for you, whether it's your hair, your nails, getting a massage, but also the obligation, and I'd say obligation of going to your doctor, having your annual checkups, making sure that we are staying ahead of preventable diseases. And that's just the way to go if you want to leave a healthy mark on yourself.
The last thing I'll ask you is, I know you've been advocating that rest and retreat are forms of regeneration. They are revolutionary. They are necessary. What's the connection between rest and resistance in your life?
The connection between rest and resistance in my life is a little political, right? I think a lot of us have been branded as the 92%, as we saw from the last election, for those of us who were advocating for our candidate to win. And unfortunately that didn't happen. But what we saw is what Black women do best is what we organize naturally. And by organizing and taking things into our own account, it can lead to burnout. And so there's a grandma who went viral on TikTok who's like, get somebody else to do it. So I've taken some advice from her, and I'm like, you know what, I've done a lot. I'm not going to say I've done everything, but I have lived a very fruitful life and a very different path in life, that it's so I can pass the torch to let somebody else do it for now. and be in this season of rest and be in this season of balance that makes sense to me now. I don't think I accepted balance as a way of life ever, and so now I do.
On Monday, there is a push for women to take the day off, rest, reset, restore. Not all of us will be able to do that. Well, what will you be doing on Monday on this National Day of Rest for Black women?
I'm either going to do yoga or I'm going to go for a walk. And so when I go for a walk, it's a time to just clear my mind. And weather aside, I like to do my walks outside because I have a different feeling than, just going on the treadmill inside. And again, I encourage people, if you don't have the luxury of taking off from work, that you can still make time for yourself. You can make an hour, whether it's, do you like to cook? Do you like to go to Zumba? Do you like to talk to your girlfriend that you haven't talked to? I mean, something that's going to feed your soul, whatever that is to you. But do make time, put it on your calendar. I've started to do that too, to make sure that I can check that box, because I know people who are type A are still going to be type A even when they're at rest. So making sure that you incorporate these practices into your daily life.
Putting rest and yourself on the to-do list.
Yes.
Jalina Porter, thank you for these wonderful pearls of wisdom. It is always great to talk to a fellow bison.
Yes.
And to learn some lessons, and I hope other Black women have today, some lessons that will help them to have more restful and fulfilling lives. So
Absolutely.
thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching us here on WUSA 9+.